Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on all things related to narcissism, narcissistic personalities, and just difficult and toxic relationships. Back to those proverbs, which just my favorite emails are when people send me more proverb ideas. And I can't tell you, I've never enjoyed reading this many proverbs before. Never thought I could. But today we're going to take on one that's a really interesting one, which I'd never heard before, which was fall 7 times, stand up 8. So this is actually a Japanese proverb, a Zen proverb. I was not able to find anywhere why they chose 7 times versus any other number. If any of you know why they chose 7 for this particular proverb, please tell me, because I researched it, I couldn't find it. But there's an interesting, that 7 actually ends up becoming quite interesting in a minute, and you'll see. I had actually, like I said, not heard this one, but I've heard variants of this proverb, things like getting back on the horse after you fall off, that kind of thing. But there's a definite sort of sense of persistence built into this one, right? 7 times fall, 8th time up, and I guess you stay up, right? As with so many proverbs, there is both a good and healthy bit of wisdom in this one, as well as some potentially risky suggestions. Again, all of these proverbs have that with specifically in terms of narcissistic relationships. Now, in this case, in this proverb, I see much more of the positive than the negative, but we'll get to both. Now, my interpretation of this proverb is probably quite similar to the rest of yours, is that even with multiple failures or multiple setbacks, you can still get up one more time. And when I initially read it, I like to think that when the person got up for the 8th time, they stayed up. Now, a narcissistic relationship is an unwanted class in resilience. That's you learn it, but in a kind of icky way. After getting through these relationships, many, though I understand not all, many people find a strength, a flexibility, acceptance, grace, and wisdom that they did not know that they have. Those that can go all in on radical acceptance and realistic expectations and discernment and self-advocacy, they come out as rather solid units in terms of people that they are. I was listening to a friend talk to a group recently, and it made me happy to see her get it. She said that once you start talking about narcissistic abuse in a group of people, the people who actually get it, you can really see it in their eyes. And I have to say, I have the privilege and honor of doing this work. And I see it all the time. I see it in their eyes, in my clients, in people with whom I've been do speaking engagements with, in my colleagues, and even in strangers. You can always see the survivors. There's just something in their eyes. Now, a narcissistic relationship is a study in confusion, and then education, and then pattern detection. It is a journey into disappointment, frustration, confusion, helplessness, anxiety, self-blame, and self-doubt. There's 7 falls right there. And then hopefully that 8th time, getting up and staying up. This proverb also evokes some thoughts about hoovering, right? That a person in a narcissistic relationship will repeatedly get hoovered into the relationship. Interestingly, the National Domestic Violence Hotline and other sources have reported that a woman in a domestically abusive relationship will return an average of 7 times to an abusive relationship. That means that hoovering, sadly and tragically, is to be accepted, and the irony of that statistic of 7 times was not lost on me in lieu of this proverb. Each time a person leaves, they take a tremendous risk in a domestically abusive relationship. In narcissistically abusive relationships, it may be a risk to safety, but it is also a risk psychologically. However, the hope is that each time there may be a connection that's made to resources, to mental health care, to other supports. Maybe each time, if the person survives, they will get to a point where they can commit to safely leaving, or that other systems may make it possible to finally stay away. For example, incarceration of the offender, or the perpetrator just moves on to something or someone else. Many people become very self-blaming and very self-disparaging when they go back and things end up just as bad as always. I always want to reassure them that returning and going back into those relationships is normal and it's part of the process. We as people simply do not have sufficient access to the information, the mental health services, and the support that people need to make these transitions. And then when you couple that with trauma bonding, fear, cognitive dissonance, and intergenerational cycles, it actually would be unusual for a person to be one and done in terms of leaving one of these relationships. The falling down more than once is part of the process of letting go of a narcissistic relationship. There is a point when there's sort of an inflection point. You have enough support, information, and data based on your experience, coupled with internal strength, or maybe a devil-may-care attitude. You just had it, and a person gets out. It is often quite messy, expensive, painful, and traumatic to leave. But that time finally comes, and people do leave. Falling and getting up is the nature of these cycles and these relationships. In the classical narcissistic relationship cycle, we talk about love bombing, devaluing, discarding, and hoovering. And cycles tend to repeat, falling down and then getting back up. And keep in mind that leaving a narcissistic relationship is not the only way of getting back up. People cannot always leave these relationships. And in those cases, and they may not always want to leave, and in those cases, the getting back up may be learning about boundaries, having realistic expectations, maintaining radical acceptance, learning to gray rock, cultivating other sources of support, getting into therapy, and learning more about these cycles. Getting back up then becomes taking back some aspects of your life and no longer letting the narcissist control the emotional thermostat. It can feel like a rather superficial and unsatisfying relationship if you do stay in it, but at a minimum, you are avoiding the gaslighting, or at least dodging it, and as well as some of the abuse. Survivorship and healing from narcissistic abuse doesn't always look the same, and it is a long-term, ongoing process. That Zen proverb, that Zen 8th time that you get up, looks different for everyone. Learning to manage the relationship, getting out, forgiving yourself, and not blaming yourself for what happened because you're not responsible, to just keep standing and being compassionate with yourself is a critical part of healing. There is the risk of this proverb of being heard as just keep trying in one of these relationships. Maybe this will change. No, it's not likely to change. So if you keep falling back in for that reason, that will leave you hurt. But if you don't let it break you and learn about it and slowly figure out what works for you, then that is all we can hope for with this 7 down, 8 up proverb. Resilience and persistence are so apparent in survivors of narcissistic abuse. And after years of being told that you are not resilient, it can be difficult to believe it. But believe it. Anyone who can get up to do another day, to get through another day, after living in a gaslighted, upside-down world, well, as far as I'm concerned, that's as resilient as it comes. So, fall 7, get up 8, and actually the coincidence of that domestic violence statistic with this proverb really quite shocked me. Thanks again.